We celebrate the blockbusters, the billion-dollar franchises, the calculated hits that conquered the box office. But history isn't only written by giants. Sometimes, it's rewritten by mistakes. For every carefully crafted franchise, there's a forgotten film that stumbled into greatness by chance, by desperation, or sheer accident. These were never meant to change cinema. They were made in chaos, under pressure, with low expectations, and yet, somehow, they became blueprints for the future. A stunt gone too far. A director with nothing left to lose. A foreign film shot on borrowed gear that made Hollywood look outdated overnight. They didn't have budgets, stars, or marketing empires. What they had was something purer necessity. And necessity, in cinema, often breeds revolution. From John Wick's gun-fu precision to the raw madness of The Raid, from the dust-choked highways of Mad Max to the quiet tragedy of First Blood, every one of these films carries a moment where the plan fell apart and something timeless was born. These are not the usual suspects. They are the accidents that became milestones, the forgotten sparks that ignited movements. So tonight, we open the vault on 15 action films that didn't just entertain, they accidentally changed cinema forever. 1. John Wick, 2014. A man mourns a dog, Hollywood laughs. But by the time the first bullet hits, nobody's laughing anymore. John Wick began as a modest revenge story. No franchise plans, no expectations. Keanu Reeves, once dismissed as an action relic, took a role meant for anyone but him. The film's directors, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, were stunt veterans, making their feature debut outsiders, betting on precision over spectacle. What emerged was a clean burn of purpose and pain. The choreography looked alien to American eyes. Gunfu, a seamless fusion of judo, jujutsu, and live-fire combat filmed in long, unbroken takes. Nah shaky camera, nah cheap edits, just cold, deliberate violence. Reeves trained like a soldier, not an actor, rehearsing live rounds and real reloads until movement became instinct. The story barely mattered. The movement was the story. When it hit theaters, the film didn't explode, it seeped. Then it grew. Word by word, frame by frame, it rebuilt Keanu's legend and rewired how action looked, sounded, and moved. By accident or design, John Wick made precision emotional, and in its shadow, the world rediscovered the beauty of brutality. But just as Hollywood found poetry in control, another film from Indonesia would find it in chaos. 2. The Raid, 2011. No stars, no English, no mercy. In 2011, Welsh director Gareth Evans shot an action film in Jakarta with a cast of unknowns and a budget barely covering the bullets. The premise, an elite team trapped in a high-rise run by criminals, simple, contained, disposable, except it wasn't. From the first punch, The Raid broke sound and rhythm. Evans introduced the world to Pencak Silat, a martial art so sharp it looked impossible to choreograph, and yet every movement was real. Lead actor Iko Uwais didn't perform stunts. He survived them. Walls shattered, limbs snapped. The audience forgot to breathe. There was no glamour, no quips, no slow-motion ballet, just grit, blood, and the ugly sound of survival. Western directors suddenly realized they'd been faking realism all along. Within 2 years, every fight scene in Hollywood wanted to look like The Raid. Ironically, it was too raw for its own country at first, but overseas, it became gospel. And from that gospel, a new faith in hand-to-hand combat was born. Yet, if The Raid was power through discipline, the next revolution came from pure chaos, a film shot on pocket change that taught studios humility. 3. El Mariachi, 1992. A guitar case, a dream, $7,000. Before Robert Rodriguez became a Hollywood name, he was a broke film student volunteering for medical experiments to fund his first movie. El Mariachi wasn't supposed to reach theaters, it was meant for Mexican video shelves, an exercise in self-training. Rodriguez had no crew, no stunt doubles, and barely any tape. He edited on 2 VCRs, recorded gunshots with fireworks, and begged locals to play henchmen. Every scene felt one take away from disaster. But inside that chaos lived something magnetic, energy, a style born of necessity. El Mariachi felt alive precisely because it shouldn't have worked. When Sony accidentally discovered it, they bought it, cleaned it up, and released it worldwide. Overnight, Rodriguez went from unknown to icon. His tiny movie ignited the 90 seconds wave of guerrilla filmmakers, the belief that if you had vision, not money, you could still make noise loud enough for Hollywood to hear. He didn't invent independent cinema. He just proved it could bleed, sweat, and shoot like the big leagues. And from that revelation, cinema's dusty backroads would lead somewhere far more dangerous, toward a lone cop named Max. 4. Mad Max 1979. Before the apocalypse became cool, it was just dust, sweat, and desperation. In 1979, an emergency room doctor from Australia named George Miller made a movie that looked like a fever dream on wheels. Mad Max had no major stars, no money, and almost no script. What it did have were roads endless, cracked, sun-scorched roads. Mel Gibson, then a fresh-faced nobody, became the quiet cop at the edge of a dying world. The film's violence was brutal, not heroic. Miller's medical background gave every crash a terrifying realism. When cars hit, they broke, and so did people. The production was chaos. Cars were junkyard builds. Crew members doubled as stunt drivers. Every explosion risked disaster. But somehow, the madness translated into a new language of action, speed as emotion, motion as storytelling. Audiences didn't know what they were watching. It wasn't Hollywood polish, it was survival caught on film. Mad Max became one of the most profitable movies ever made, dollar for dollar, and laid the foundation for the post-apocalyptic aesthetic that still dominates screens today. What began as an Aussie anomaly became the roadmap for cinematic ruin, and while Miller's dust settled, another storm was forming in Thailand, where a barefoot warrior was about to punch his way into history. 5. Ong Bak 2003. No wires, no doubles, no fear. In 2003, Ong Bak, Muay Thai warrior, burst out of Thailand like a roundhouse kick to the jaw of global cinema. Its star, Tony Jaa, wasn't famous. He wasn't even fluent in English, but he could fly, and that was enough. Every stunt you see in Ong Bak, the flips through flaming hoops, the bone-snapping knees, the leaps over cars was done for real. Director Pratyapinke refused CGI, refused safety nets. The fights were choreographed like street brawls filmed in slow motion, every hit landing with the dull thud of human contact. Hollywood had grown addicted to wires and digital tricks. Ong Bak reminded the world that pain could still be beautiful, that gravity could be beaten, if only for a second. Tony Jaa became a global phenomenon overnight. But unlike most overnight successes, his fame came not from a studio machine but from authentic risk. He bled for every frame, and audiences felt it. From that moment on, every fight choreographer in the West was chasing something raw, something real. And while Thailand was redefining impact, an American underdog was about to redefine the word hero. 6. Die Hard 1988. Christmas Eve. One man, no shoes. When Die Hard hit theaters in 1988, the genre didn't know what to call it. Bruce Willis, known mostly for romantic comedy, wasn't built like Stallone or Schwarzenegger. He was ordinary, and that became his weapon. John McClane wasn't superhuman. He was tired, terrified, and bleeding. He cracked jokes to stay sane. He failed more than he won. Yet every moment of pain made him more real, and audiences connected instantly. Director John McTiernan turned a simple hostage thriller into a claustrophobic opera of tension and glass shards. The Nakatomi Plaza became a vertical battlefield. The villains were charming, the explosions precise, the pacing relentless. And then there was that fall, Hans Gruber's final drop. Actor Alan Rickman's look of fear? Genuine. The crew had released him a second early. That's how Die Hard worked. Planned chaos, captured truth. The film reprogrammed action cinema. Heroes could now bleed, cry, joke, and still win. The formula, one man versus impossible odds, became a template copied endlessly for decades. Hollywood learned that courage didn't need muscles, it needed vulnerability. And while McClane fought alone in a skyscraper, another legend was fighting through mirrors, philosophy, and destiny in Hong Kong. 7. Enter the Dragon 1973. A man who didn't live to see his revolution. In 1973, Bruce Lee stood on the edge of a cultural explosion. Enter the Dragon was meant to be a crossover experiment, part Hong Kong martial arts, part Hollywood crime story. But what Lee created was something far greater, a manifesto in motion. The studios wanted a spectacle, Lee wanted a philosophy. Every movement, every fight was a lesson. He insisted on wide shots, long takes, no cuts to hide the truth. The human body, he said, is the ultimate weapon. The result was hypnotic, a fight film that felt alive, thoughtful, and pure. But fate intervened. Lee died just days before the premiere, never witnessing the shockwave that followed. When Enter the Dragon hit theaters, it didn't just break box office records, it shattered walls. Suddenly, an Asian lead was the face of global action. Western filmmakers scrambled to mimic the rhythm, the sweat, the spiritual power behind each kick. It was supposed to be just another martial arts film. It became a bridge between worlds and a tombstone for its creator. And while Lee's fists bridged continents, the next revolution would leap across rooftops instead of punching through walls. 8. District B13, 2004. A city divided, two men running out of time, and gravity optional. When District B13 dropped in 2004, no one expected a revolution in motion. Produced by Luc Besson and directed by Pierre Morel, it wasn't the story that caught the world's eye, it was how the human body could tell one. Star David Bell wasn't an actor, he was a tracer, a pioneer of parkour. He didn't perform stunts, he escaped reality. Leaping from building to building, dodging bullets, sprinting through collapsing concrete, Bell transformed the screen into a playground of survival. No wires, no CGI, just muscle, momentum, and madness. The plot, a cop and a convict trying to defuse a bomb, was secondary to the movement. Every chase was raw, uncut, desperate. Audiences had never seen speed filmed this honestly, Hollywood noticed. Within a few years, Casino Royale and The Bourne Ultimatum were stealing the same rhythm. Parkour became shorthand for modern, for real. Ironically, District B13 never needed Hollywood. Its rebellion was already complete. One wall, one jump, one impossible landing at a time. And if this film proved that the body could defy physics, the next would show that violence could become poetry. 9. Hard-boiled, 1992. A gun in each hand, a baby in the other. Smoke, fire, and grace. John Woo's Hard-Boiled isn't a movie, it's a symphony of destruction. Released in 1992, it was the director's farewell to Hong Kong before heading west, and he went out with a bang. Literally thousands of them. The story, an idealistic cop teaming with a tortured undercover agent, is simple, but the execution is pure chaos refined into beauty. Woo's camera glides through explosions as Chow Yun-Fat pirouettes between bullets. It's not violence, it's choreography. The hospital shootout shot in a single, dizzying take became legend. 2,000 squibs detonated in perfect rhythm. Fire, smoke, screaming, and yet every shot felt like a dance beat. There's irony in that beauty. Woo didn't glamorize killing, he romanticized honor, even amid ruin. Western filmmakers, from Tarantino to the Wachowskis, studied him like scripture. But when Woo finally came to Hollywood, studios trimmed his wings. They misunderstood the art in the chaos. No matter, the damage was done. Hard-Boiled had already redefined the language of gunfire forever. And as doves flew through the smoke of Hong Kong, another director, thousands of miles away, was about to bend reality itself. 10. Wanted, 2008. Sometimes, breaking logic is the only way to make something unforgettable. In 2008, Wanted arrived as a strange, hyper-stylized comic adaptation no one asked for. It was loud, defiant, and visually unhinged bullets curving through air, cars flipping like gymnasts, and assassins following the orders of fate woven by a literal loom. Timur Bekmambetov, a Kazakh director with a taste for chaos, didn't care about physics. He cared about rhythm. Every action sequence in Wanted played like a comic panel exploding into life. James McAvoy's transformation from pathetic office worker to gunslinging prodigy mirrored the film's tone, ordinary becoming extraordinary through sheer madness. And then came the shot, the one no one forgot, the curved bullet. A perfect metaphor for the movie itself, bending rules until they became art. Critics called it absurd. Fans called it genius. The box office called it undeniable. Hollywood realized audiences were ready for something surreal again, something stylish, reckless, unapologetically impossible. Wanted opened the door for a new kind of action movie, self-aware, violent, and gleefully cinematic. It didn't make sense. It didn't need to. It only needed to move. And just as Wanted twisted physics, the next film would strip everything back, trading spectacle for sweat, silence, and survival. 11. The Bourne Identity, 2002. He woke up with no name and changed the name of every spy film that followed. When The Bourne Identity was released in 2002, it was meant to be a standard espionage thriller. Instead, it tore down everything audiences thought they knew about the genre. Matt Damon wasn't suave. He wasn't glamorous. He was cold, confused, and frighteningly efficient. Doug Liman's direction captured action not as entertainment but as instinct. The fights were close, messy, claustrophobic. Every hit felt improvised. Bourne didn't fight for show, he fought to live. Even the now famous pen fight scene was born from pure necessity. filmed in a cramped apartment with barely any choreography. What began as a troubled production rewrites, delays, reshoots ended up defining a new visual language. The camera shook, the editing cut fast, the audience stayed disoriented. It wasn't about control, it was about urgency. Hollywood watched closely. Soon, every spy and soldier on screen moved like Bourne. Even Bond had to evolve. A film once destined for mediocrity accidentally set a new standard, turning confusion into clarity, chaos into rhythm. And just as Bourne grounded the genre, the next film would lift it to mythic heights with blood, bronze, and pixels. 2006. This is not history, this is theater with a heartbeat of war. In 2006, 300 erupted into pop culture like a battle cry. Adapted from Frank Miller's graphic novel, Zack Snyder's vision wasn't about Sparta, it was about style. Every frame dripped with shadow and fire. Every movement looked painted, deliberate, immortal. Gerard Butler led an army of half-naked warriors into cinematic eternity, shouting, "This is Sparta," as though summoning a new genre into existence. And in many ways, he did. Snyder shot almost entirely on green screen, blending live action with digital backdrops to create a world between realism and myth. Critics called it artificial, audiences called it transcendent. The movie's slow-motion blood and stylized choreography became instantly iconic. Behind the spectacle was something bigger. 300 proved you didn't need physical sets or realism to make emotion feel real. A stylized image could hit harder than any explosion. It was an experiment in pure cinematic exaggeration, and it worked. The ripple effect carried through Watchmen, Sin City, and even superhero storytelling for years to come. 300 didn't depict truth, it depicted belief. And belief, in cinema, is more dangerous than fact. The next film, though, would abandon myth entirely and take us deep into the jungle where fear hunts the strongest. 13. Predator 1987. They came to make an action movie. They ended up inventing a monster. In 1987, Predator began as a studio joke. What if Rocky fought an alien? The idea sounded ridiculous, and maybe it was. But when director John McTiernan and Arnold Schwarzenegger took it to the jungle, something shifted. The story was simple. A team of commandos on a rescue mission becomes the hunted. Yet beneath the muscle and bullets, Predator turned into something primal. A war film mutating into horror. The unseen creature wasn't just stalking men, it was dismantling the myth of masculinity itself. The production was chaos. The first alien design was scrapped mid-shoot. Jean-Claude Van Damme quit after wearing a bright red bug suit. Then came the redesigned Stan Winston's masterpiece of dread, mandibles, thermal vision, invisibility. A hunter unlike anything before. Schwarzenegger's team, each man a walking archetype, was stripped down, exposed, defeated. The jungle devoured them. In the end, the strongest survived not with firepower, but with instinct. What started as a testosterone fantasy became a deconstruction of it. And from its ashes rose a new hybrid. Action that could terrify, horror that could thrill. But while Predator thrived on tension, the next film would embrace total chaos and treat adrenaline as a literal drug. 14. Crank 2006. If your heart stops, the movie stops. That was the premise and the attitude behind Crank, a 2006 experiment in cinematic insanity. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor didn't just film Jason Statham's performance. They chased it through Los Angeles like a live wire. Statham's character, Chev Chelios, has been poisoned. To survive, he must keep his adrenaline spiking. The camera mirrors his panic handheld, erratic, alive. The filmmakers used rollerblades and motorcycles to follow him in real time. Every scene feels like it could collapse any second. There are no rules, no restraint. Sex in public, defibrillators in cars, shootouts mid-fall. Crank doesn't care about logic, it cares about momentum. It mocks the genre even as it amplifies it, turning cliché into fever dream. It was supposed to be a B-movie. Instead, it became a manifesto of motion, a film about the death of subtlety, where energy is art and exhaustion is honesty. And when the credits roll, Chev is falling from the sky, grinning, dead but not defeated, because in Crank, even gravity gives up. But for our final story, we return to where action began with a man who didn't want to fight, and a film that never wanted to become a legend. 15. Rambo First Blood 1982. Before the sequels, before the myth, Before the war cry, there was silence. In First Blood, John Rambo isn't a killing machine. He's a ghost of a soldier trying to re-enter a world that no longer has a place for him. Sylvester Stallone plays him not as a hero, but as a man unraveling. The film's violence is sparse, accidental. The tension grows not from combat, but from misunderstanding. A small-town sheriff sees a vagrant. Rambo sees another battlefield. And when survival instinct takes over, the war begins again, this time on home soil. Originally, Rambo was meant to die. Stallone fought to change it. He's already dead inside, he said. And so, the film ends not with victory, but with breakdown Rambo collapsing, sobbing, confessing. It's not triumph, it's trauma. Ironically, audiences missed the message. They saw strength where there was pain. They made him a symbol of invincibility. Hollywood turned his tragedy into spectacle. The man who wanted peace became the face of war. And First Blood, meant to condemn violence, ended up canonizing it. Bonus fact: Game of Death, 1978. A film finished by ghosts. Game of Death was supposed to be Bruce Lee's next masterpiece. A story about a martial artist climbing a pagoda, each floor guarded by a new fighter, each battle representing a different philosophy of combat. It was his message to the world: adapt, evolve, survive. But then, Bruce Lee died. Only a handful of scenes were complete. The project stopped until 5 years later, when producers decided to finish it without him. What followed bordered on the macabre. Body doubles, cardboard masks, footage stolen from Lee's earlier films, even scenes from his real funeral were edited into the movie. The result was a cinematic Frankenstein part tribute, part exploitation. Yet, amid the grotesque spectacle, fragments of brilliance endured. The original 11 minutes of Lee's authentic footage, especially his fight with basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, reveal the clarity of his vision. Each move, each expression carried a philosophy, fluid, adaptable, beyond ego. In the end, Game of Death became less a film and more a warning. It showed what happens when art outlives its artist and when commerce tries to reanimate genius. Even in imitation, Bruce Lee's shadow moved with more life than those who tried to replace him. And so, perhaps fittingly, his unfinished film taught one last lesson: you can fake motion but never spirit. Accidents, experiments, chaos. From small mistakes to global revolutions, these films remind us that cinema's greatest transformations rarely come from control. They come from the cracks where everything falls apart. Some of these stories began with failure, others began with death. Yet all of them changed what we see, what we feel, and what we expect from a simple action scene. So now it's your turn. Which film on this list surprised you the most? And which forgotten piece of chaos do you think truly changed cinema forever?